For decades, we have been told water temperature is responsible for seasonal bass movement. There are literally hundreds of articles and videos that talk about this. Well, I 100% used to believe it until I started spending time filming bass underwater. And then what I was seeing to what I've been told just didn't line up. In this video, I'm going to cover what I believe is going on with seasonal movement with actual support and proof, how it affects your seasonal fishing, and where exactly water temperature does make a huge difference. Well, let's go over first what I have witnessed. The last several years we have had exceptionally cold weather well into what traditionally would be spawning season. And I have also the last couple of years spent time filming bass underwater as soon as the ice starts to pull off of the bank. Well, I have seen multiple times where water temps are in the upper 30s and low 40s, and there are literally piles of bass in shallow water, specifically in less than 5 feet of water, which bass anglers love because this is a great depth, a great zone to target bass. Now you may be wondering, how exactly do I know about these temperatures? Well, my camera has a temperature sensor on it, and I have learned a lot by observing that. Now, traditional thinking about bass movement and water temp would tell us that these fish should no way be moving shallow yet. This just isn't true. I've seen evidence of this that completely refutes this firsthand over and over again. So what is actually going on? Well, I started to ponder whether or not daylight, or the amount of daylight, has a bigger impact on seasonal movements than water temperature. And yes, the longer daylight means warming temps. They are related, but like I mentioned earlier, we can have drastically unseasonable weather where those temps are much cooler than they should be. This last May in 2023, the water was 20 to 25 degrees cooler than it traditionally is. And if we went off normal thinking that people have talked about or articles have talked about, those bass would be nowhere in the shallows. But there were fish all over the place up in just a couple of feet of water. Now, the actual spawning wasn't taking place yet until those temps got to where they were more conducive to warming the nest and warming the eggs, but they were there. And it has been researched and documented that length of daylight, the amount of daylight, has had a huge impact in animal migration across many, many different species. Well, why wouldn't that be the same for bass? Well, I finally found an article by Kevin Van Dam from a couple of years ago that talked about this exact same thing. And he had been seeing this, witnessing this on his home waters in Michigan and catching all kinds of fish shallow in these ultra cold temperatures. So how does this affect your seasonal fishing? Longer daylight means those fish are going to start heading shallow no matter what the water temperature is like. So in other words, don't let cold water temps trick you into thinking that those fish are going to be deep when seasonally they should start to be up in the shallows. And right now it's late August and the amount of daylight is getting noticeably shorter. I'm all of a sudden taking my dog Millie out in the morning in complete darkness. That's so different than it was just a couple of months ago. And guess what? All over the place I am seeing bass busting up on bait fish, even though the water temperature is the hottest it has been all year. These fish are starting to put on that seasonal pattern, that seasonal movement where they are chasing bait all over the lake. Even tiny little bass, 8 and 10 inch fish, their bellies are stuffed with minnows. Now let's go over where water temperature does make a big difference and how it can help your fishing. I like to now think about water temp as a daily adjustment and then length of daylight as a seasonal adjustment. A great example, last fall, the water temps were starting to dip down a little bit, and these bass right here were all piled up on the rocks, sunning themselves on the rocks, getting that radiant heat. A couple of degrees difference made a huge factor, a huge impact on where these bass were located. Well, when we look at water temp as a daily adjustment, now we're thinking about, is that shade a couple degrees cooler? Is that current making the water in that portion of the lake a couple of degrees cooler? Those are all important considerations that could just take your fishing to an entirely new level. And hey, if you want to watch a video that kind of changes our thinking about maybe the way you fished lily pads for many years, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure to go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.